minute and we can get started. It's great to see so many of you here. How's everyone doing?
Lovely to see you guys here. We're just waiting, I think, for 1 or 2 more team members to hop on stage, and we'll be starting. So yes, I see a lot of questions about staking already in the chat. Don't worry, guys. We will be answering some of your questions in the AMA. And as you all know, we have a special guest here today. So first, of course, as per usual, we're going to be answering some of your most frequently asked questions, because I know that you are all wishing for the answers. And then we can go into something a little bit more informational, something a little bit more exciting. So let me see if we can get our other team member on stage. There we go. There we go. Now we're all complete. Perfect. I think then we can kick off. Today's AMA. So welcome everybody. We're super excited to have you here. We're super excited to do something a little bit more different this time around, because we appreciate that maybe sometimes it could be a little bit boring, or and it's always good to have a change, right? Especially if we have special guests, if we talk about things that are relevant to the crypto market, to the project, to DePIN, to AI, and things like that. So I'm going to explain to you a little bit what the structure of this AMA is going to be, because it's a little bit new, right? So first we will have a brief Q&A, where we're going to address some of your most pressing and frequently asked questions that we got from the feedback forms that we circulate every single week. Then we will welcome a special guest, which you can see on stage right now. And we're going to have a little bit of a chat about DePIN, the states of the DePIN market, challenges of decentralized computing, right, which is our topic for today. And so without further ado, let's get started with some of the most pressing questions. So these are going to be staking and worker related mostly, because those are the ones that we got most asked. So we're going to kick off things with staking. So a lot of people are asking, how does it work, right? What is the duration of staking? How long must I keep my tokens staked for? Right. So if you think about it, in order to operate your worker, you have to stake, right? Which means that your tokens have to be staked for as long as you intend to keep your worker running, basically. If Bill and Gaurav want to add something to this, please feel free to add some information about this.
Yeah, so staking is a form of collateralization rather than staking as a form of yield farming. So the staking will be on when you want to have your device being eligible for block reward. And also the staking will subject to, I believe right now our configuration is 14-day challenge period. So when you request unstake after 14 days, you will be allowed to withdraw your stake amount. And during such period, your device will no longer be eligible for block reward. That's it. From high level, I believe we will be able to announce the more detailed program rule today, hopefully. Again, I apologize for much of the delay, but we will get to discuss part of the reason why we have delays due to a smart contract audit.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much for that answer, Bill. Let's go to the next question, which is, of course, also about staking. So I think you answered this question also, right? Will staking be delayed, or is it running according to plan? So, Bill, you already told us that it's going to be delayed a little bit. Maybe Gaurav, can you add some details, or can you tell us a little bit about this?
Yes, so basically, as I communicated earlier, the functionality where it was complete. We did an internal review also. Then as a part of the launch, because it's smart contract, internally in the company, we have a policy that for any smart contract, we do an external review also. So we were actually taking the help of Solution 3 as a company to write a smart contract. And we were using Hellborn as an independent entity to review our smart contracts and any security issues there. So the report came yesterday morning. And as a part of the review, there were 4 bugs which were found out. 2 of them were critical, which we had to solve ASAP. So the bugs have been solved, and the report after solving both the bugs, the fixes have been given for the review again to the Hellborn team for security review. So they are in process of reviewing it. Hopefully they'll be done by tomorrow or early next week. So next week we are planning to release it. So, like long story short, the delay is basically from the raise of a couple of security issues from third-party audit of the smart contract.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much for answering the question, Bharat. Right, so there was a brief question that someone asked, which was, when will we be able to start staking our tokens? So of course, my understanding is that after the product goes live, then you will be able to stake your tokens. But do you have any more information as to the timeline? Will it be a specific amount of days? Will it be a week after the product goes live?
Will be granted a period of grace time for everybody to stake, right? Stake is on probably 24 to 48 hours. We're happy to listen to community feedback. What would be the amount of time necessary for everybody else to finish the staking process, right? Before we start enforcing block reward requirements of staking enough tokens, right? So that's where we are. We probably will open up a feedback, right? Suggestion 24 hours or 48 hours, right? After staking rollout, for us to enforce staking requirements. Maybe the community can later send some feedback or vote to some kind of forum, so as for us to help us decide what is the reasonable amount of time given to everybody to finish such operation.
All right, makes sense. Thank you so much, Bill. I see someone in the comments who has the same question as the question that we're about to cover, so I hope that this will answer your question. This question is, will there be a staking multiplier for workers? For example, the minimum requirements say is 100 IO or whatever, but if the worker deposits 200 or 300 per rig, will the block rewards be proportional to the staking amount? So I don't think that they will be proportional. So if you deposit extra, essentially you would have to unstake it and then go through the challenge period. But I think Bill can tell you a little bit more about this specific topic. Go for it, Bill.
So the staking, as I said before, is a collateralization for the node to ensure that the node has proper insurance in case, one, the node is being detected to be spoofing, or the node is intentionally misbehaving by stealing end user data. Right, that allow us to have enough capacity to slash. Okay, we'll discuss in slashing later, also with the detail. So the earning is proportional to will be equivalent to the current earning. Staking, again, is a collateralization process. You need to stake enough, right? Mean 100 multiplier will be adjusted in the announcement, but the amount of token is per multiplier, right? So linear proportional to your earning. From multiplier 1 to above, right? We will announce these details. So the more you stake does not make you earn more to be Sharia compliant. However, every device will have a different amount of staking per device capacity and capability.
All right, amazing. There you go. So short time to raise. No, if you stake more, you won't earn more block rewards. Right, so these were the questions that we had about staking, and let's go ahead and move to our next section of questions, which is about worker, right? These are worker-related questions. So let's start with the first one, which a lot of people were curious about. They were asking whether the situation with the spoofed GPUs is already resolved or if there's any updates about this. So Gaurav, please go ahead if you have any insight about this. We would love to hear it.
Yeah, so we have multiple signals to figure out if the number of spoofs have increased or decreased, right? One is basically like our proof of work, which flags. Second is like since the time we started sharing data on the community, a lot of people used to raise concerns that this is fake, this is fake, this is the pattern. That noise from past like some time has reduced. There's a second thing. Thirdly, the number of block eligible or block reward eligible devices, they have constantly been going down, although the network size, like the other number of devices remain same. That gives us a confidence that overall our parameters, which we have made stringent for people to be block reward eligible, they are working fine. We find things there. And fourthly, which is a very indirect way of knowing, which is we've been running this network for a long time, and all the big players, like it's just a math, right? If you run 100 workers for a long time, like one or the other worker always goes wrong. So all these big players have constantly been in touch with us to raise concern that their worker goes down or they have a driver issue. So we basically know indirectly, not by name, but by different accounts, we know who they are, these big players, right? Indirectly, because we help them so often. And what we have seen recently is that the amount of token which we are giving them, a good percentage of token are going to these big players, which have a majority amount of nodes in the network, a decent amount of hardware in the network, which also gives us the confidence that the block rewards are going to the right folks who we know from a long time and who we personally also know have right hardwares. So that also, there are multiple signals which we look into, automated way also, and this heuristic way also. So combination of all has given us a confidence in the recent past that we are improving over a period of time, and now we're at a good place.
Amazing. Thank you so much for the answer. I hope that answered you guys' questions. The team always takes really seriously the matter of spoofed GPUs, so they're always actively trying to do something about it. Right, so let's move to the next question, which is also worker related. We're going to be talking about workers that are affected by bugs that are causing jobs to fail, or for example, sometimes there are multiple people that have raised the issue that there was a cancellation of a cluster by the end user within the first 7 to 10 minutes. So the question is, will there be a compensation for the workers affected? So in this case, I think I can give the stage to Bill or Gaurav, who can talk a little bit about this, whether there will be compensations.
So I can take the first pass, right? For if you have find bugs specifically to in allowing devices to fail, please report to us. We'll analyze and assist with you. For cancellations, right? Especially the ones canceling within 1 hour, we have recently enforced a policy that the device, the end user, will not be able to cancel with a full refund in the first hour, right? So we've noticed this behavior of canceling too soon. So we enforce this minimum 1 hour of ordering for the cluster. But all other, like the second half of the cluster after beyond 1 hour, if user choose to cancel, the user can choose to cancel, right? This is on-demand platform.
Makes a lot of sense. And that is great to hear. That the team has noticed this, the engineering and the tech team, that you guys have noticed this, and that you have implemented some steps to try to avoid, the inconvenience caused to the workers. So let's move to our final question for the Q&A section, which is also worker related. So people are just curious about device support. Are we planning on supporting new devices, for example, the upcoming M4? What is the plan with device support? Bill Groff, please take the stage.
Absolutely, right. We are looking at the ever-evolving GPU marketplace and availability of devices, right? We are actually in contact with several groups who are proposing H200, right? But H200 is too new, it's very hard for us to understand its usefulness and other things. So we're working with partner networks together and the partner supplier together to evaluate and benchmark H200. You may see a report coming in probably in the next 2 to 3 weeks. So we are constantly evaluating more devices to be added based on whatever capability is coming out, right? But we need to know the drivers, the capabilities, the right set of multiplier, but also the right set of price for this.
Amazing to hear. I think a lot of people will be happy that, at the end of the day, we are a DePIN, right? So because it's a bit of an experimental space, you're always looking for things to better the project, better the technology. So of course it makes sense that you would also be looking at expanding the support of devices, right? So with that being said, we have covered most of the questions that we encountered from our Q&A. If you had a question in the chat and it wasn't answered, or you would like for it to be answered, please don't hesitate to just fill in the form for next week's AMA, and we can always cover it in the AMA. And also give us your feedback. There's also a section for feedback, opinions, or anything that may be troubling you in your mind. So please feel free to just give us our suggestions in the forum also, not just your questions. But we have these every week. And there are also wonderful people in the Discord that are willing to help. We have an intercom with support if you have something very technical that you need resolved by the technical team or the support team. So there are multiple ways for you to get your answers resolved. So please feel free to access any of these. That being said, we're going to move into a little bit more of a conversational discussion section of today's AMA. So as you guys may have noticed from the title of the AMA, we have a special guest today with us. He is the head of the House of Chimera. Please, apologies if I say your name wrong, but Dedric, right? I lived in the Netherlands for 7 years, so I should be able to pronounce it, but...
It's actually not bad. You actually did quite well.
Thank you.
I mean, I've heard way worse. This is actually not bad. And you've lived in the Netherlands. Why were you in the Netherlands for?
Well, I was studying in the Netherlands for 7 years, actually. I did my IB there. I did the university there. A bunch of stuff there, basically. I loved it. It was amazing.
Gotcha. Well, yeah, Netherlands is quite good. It's quite a good place to be in. And yeah, a lot of people study here, specifically international students come here to do several studies. So yeah, I'm the founder of House of Chimera. So we are a research company. So obviously we did one of the research pieces on IONET. We've been one of the, I would say, front runners in terms of research on DePIN in general. For example, we have by far made the most comprehensive DePIN overview with a lot of DePIN projects. And it's quite interesting to see how DePIN is growing. Besides just the decentralized GPU computing, it's also growing into more sectors. So we see more like telecom as well, environmental. A lot of new things are being tried. Obviously, some are a bit more successful than others. It's also very cool to finally hear a few voices, like Bill, for example. Bill have helped us quite a bit with our research. We have bothered him with a lot of questions. It's also it's really good to hear finally a voice than just a few letters. So I'm very happy to be here, and I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Sounds amazing. Thank you so much for the introduction. Indeed, when it comes to Discord space, you always see a username, you're always chatting and this and that. So it's always nice to have a voice to kind of associate the person that you've been chatting with, right? So of course we have the head of House of Chimera, Mr. Dedric. Sorry again, I'm trying my best. But we have As always, we have the chief, the boss in the house, Mr. Tory Green, and he is going to be, having a little chat with Dedric. They're going to be talking a little bit about DePIN, the challenges of decentralized computing, and so on. So, Tory, if you want to say just a brief couple of words just to kick off this AMA, and we can get started.
Sure. Well, I don't think I need to introduce myself. I think most of you know me, and it's obviously great to see everyone again. And Dedric, it's great to have you on board. I'm a big fan of your research, and looking forward to our chat.
Sounds good. Tory, thank you so much for the introduction. Well, firstly, thank you both for the introduction. And I think we can officially kind of kickstart this. So I'm gonna leave you guys to it. So maybe let's get started with a bit of a chat about the challenges of decentralized computing. So maybe, Dedric, you can kind of kick off and tell us a little bit about what you have found based on your research, because you do very thorough research. And we can go from there, whenever you guys are ready.
Sure. I think it's really good, before we go to the challenges, to kind of understand, considering this is one of the biggest misconceptions which we have found so far, is that whenever people are talking about compute, and we are talking about decentralized compute, people think you can just build a data center somewhere. People just like, all right, you just need a bit of land, and you make a bit building, you stock it completely filled with GPUs, and here we go. But unfortunately, the reality is that it's not that easy. A lot of research which we have seen is people tend to oversee the environmental impact. And you could say, well, environmental impact, why would we care? Well, now day and age, it's a thing which you really have to think about. There's a big misconception about the fact that you need a lot of voltage, generally a lot of electricity, and you need a lot of water, specifically to cool all these GPUs on a big scale, right? High voltage is hard to control, that is one, but it's also hard to get, and also reliably get. So then obviously we got an alternative, which is decentralized compute. And then people are like, yes, then at least we have if we can decentralize it, so far we can put GPUs everywhere, and then at least we do not have that issue of the electricity issue, considering it's all decentralized all around the world, right? So you don't have one spot where you need a lot of electricity. So far we have fixed that problem. Regarding the water/cooling, the cooling issue, so you need a lot of water to cool. That's not necessarily solved, but it's relatively the same what you could say for electricity. Whenever you distribute it to around the world, you do not need a lot of water on one space. In one place, it's much easier to get maybe some water in China, a bit of water in Europe, a bit of in the US. It's much easier to distribute. But then becomes, right, if decentralized compute would solve all the issues, why do we not use it, right? Considering there are other issues which we have to overcome. So I think there's currently two really big industries which would benefit from decentralized compute. That is AI and cloud gaming, right? Well, for AI, there's a couple of things which are very important, which has to be reliable. So all your compute has to be very reliable for basically 99.9% uptime. It has to be available, so you need, obviously, I think Bill already talked about the H200s, like the top-notch GPUs out there. Well, H100s are also top of the line still. You need really high-end GPUs, which are relatively hard to get, because that's actually how NVIDIA is sort of controlling the market there. It has to be resilient. Well, you guys already talked about it earlier. You do not want just fake GPUs. You want a mechanism which is completely resilient, which is as resilient as a centralized counterpart. And the last, and that's actually a very hard part, is it has to comply with regulations. And a lot of people would say, well, why do you care? Regulations, we do not have any regulations yet, for the most part. Well, there are some regulations whereby, for example, you cannot use certain NVIDIA cards in China because there are embargoes. that sort of challenge are very, in my opinion, relatively hard to overcome with decentralized GPU computing. Just because it's very hard to, you can make a sort of a governance system, I guess, whereby you would say, well, we're gonna check whoever is in China and if they would actually get our GPUs, but it's very easy to most likely overcome that with VPNs. People are relatively smart nowadays. So that's a bit of my stance in the GPU, decentralized GPU computing space, where I see a few challenges. I'm very much looking forward to what do you think about that, Tory?
So, I mean, that was a great answer, very thorough. Stepping back, when I look at DePINs, obviously, the benefits are clear, right? And whether this is GPUs, whether it's any other type of DePIN, you basically have the ability to sort of like access this. Let's look at compute. The ability to access this global pool of compute and put it all into a single network provides just numerous benefits, right? Number one, you have access to massive computing power. Even with IONET now, you can access hundreds of thousands of GPUs with a touch of a button. Two, obviously scalability, right? There are clear physical constraints to centralized data centers. You have to get permitted, you have to buy land, you have to deliver the GPUs, you have to do all this stuff. And it's a lot of CapEx requirements, and so it's very, very difficult to scale centralized data centers, and that's what we've seen. Obviously, DePINs, they're censorship resistant, right? Like right now, we've sort of seen what Amazon and Google and other players are doing with their AI, and we've seen some censorship creep in, so that's obviously another benefit. And then finally, and the clearest, is the cost efficiency. It's like the whole DePIN idea is it's like Airbnb, right? We always say we're Airbnb for GPUs, and whether it's Airbnb or Uber, by dramatically expanding supply, you effectively create structural arbitrage, right? You can have prices that are 10 times lower for a consumer, but also have profits that are 10 times higher for a supplier. And so I think the benefits are pretty clear, right? So the question is, why isn't everyone using DePIN? And I think you really have to sort of go back to this idea of disruption. And disruption is a term that is used a lot, but most people use it incorrectly. And I was a VC for several years, so I really studied the academic background of disruption. And a good example of disruption is the telephone, right? So normally disruptive products always start off worse, but they do something that the incumbent can't. And so if you look at the first telephones, back in the late 1800s, 1900s, they weren't very good, right? They only went like a mile or so. And so people could only use them for local business. Like you couldn't use them for international or intercontinental business. You still had to use the telegraph. And so no serious person was using the early telephone. But obviously telephones did something that no one else could, which is the ability to real-time chat. Now this got telephones their initial customer base. And then what happened as the technology got better, they were able to move up market and obviously disrupt the telegraph. I think that's what we're seeing in DePINs, right? Like DePINs offer two advantages that traditional cloud incumbents cannot recreate. Number one is access to unlimited computing power. And number two is this cost efficiency. Now, are DePINs right now as reliable as AWS, GCP, Azure? Probably not. So that's a short-term challenge. But the reason, so if we're not as reliable, how do we get business? Well, we get business because for a certain subset of customers, this need for cost savings and access to power quickly is just so important that we're basically like getting those customers. Now, like any disruptive product, we're going to continue to move up market, right? Every day, every week, every month, our technology gets better. And our long-term goal is to meet or exceed the performance of traditional cloud providers. Now, you might say, okay, well, how can we exceed the performance of a traditional cloud provider, right? Like, aren't decentralized networks inherently slower? That's probably the biggest criticism I hear, and I don't think that's necessarily true for a couple reasons. Sort of all things being equal, maybe you could make an argument that for some use cases, decentralized networks are slower, right? Like if you have two sort of exact, like two data centers that are exactly the same, and one is distributed, then maybe the distributed one will be slower to train a model. But in the real world, there are so many other mitigating factors, right? You have to look at the upload down speed of the data center, the location to the client. There's all these different things. And so, for us, 60% of our data centers are have faster connection speeds than Lambda labs. So maybe actually being decentralized, like if we're tapping into faster data centers, our latency may be lower. We may be faster. Distance is also another thing. Like let's imagine that, like you're a hedge fund and you are using your AI to trade, right? You're a hedge fund out of New York. Well, right now, maybe the nearest AWS data center is in Texas. Well, what if we got you an independent data center in upstate New York? Like that, those microseconds of latency could offer you a huge competitive advantage, and that trader could make a ton of money. And finally, we're also actually seeing, and this was sort of a happy surprise to us, at least for inferencing, our distributed nature is actually a competitive advantage. In a way, our nodes are acting as a de facto CDN. And so, let's say that you have an image generation app and you're in Vietnam. And, a user in Vietnam requests like, hey, give me a picture of a dog wearing a hat. Well, if you're using AWS, that user has to ping from Vietnam to Texas. And, that could be a long time to get a picture. I mean, we're talking milliseconds, but it could be a relatively long time to get a picture of a dog with a hat. Now, with us, with our globally decentralized network, maybe we have a data center in Singapore. And so, that would be slightly quicker, which would provide a better user experience. And so already we're sort of seeing some of the performance benefits of DePINs. And I think that as decentralized networks continue to grow, we will see more and more of these reliability improvements. And it's going to get to a point where you basically can match the performance of AWS at like 50, 60, 70, 80% cheaper. And, that's when full disruption comes.
I think it's a fair point. I don't think I do disagree. I'm specifically with the metaphor in the beginning that obviously most disruptive technologies start very well at a bad point. I mean, the internet was another really good example of this, and look where we're at now. There's two things I'm actually I would say a bit worried about for DePIN. Is one, how decentralized is DePIN? You see a lot of DePIN projects which say, well, we are decentralized, but if you look into the actual cover of these projects, there are real centralized components. And the second part is, I'm very much worried about, we are now in a world whereby there's a clear trade war for a couple of years now, right? And specifically with chips. We see different countries are not allowed to use certain chips just because, well, the US said so. Therefore, you're not allowed to use, I think it's China, it's Iran, it's a couple of others, which are not allowed to actually get their hands on high-end GPUs. Obviously, through a decentralized network, they would be easily able to. And I'm quite worried about the fact how the government will react to that.
Yeah, and like you said, obviously, even if a DePIN tries to protect, there's the issue of using VPNs. Now, I'm not a lawyer, but like really getting deep down in the law on this, there's in law, there's two terms, right? There's strict liability and best efforts. The difference would be like, best efforts is like, did you try to block those people? Strict liability is like, were you speeding? Like, it doesn't matter were you speeding or not. I don't think the law knows where they are, right? Is it like, if a DePIN is trying their best to exclude users from China, are they going to be okay? Or is it if there's any users from China? We just don't know. And obviously, that's a risk. But I do think that like, especially as we grow, like we've actually talked to, like, I think every DePIN talks to people at the government. They're trying to figure this out. They want to make these things work, and so I have faith that they will do the right thing in the long run. And then, what was your other point that you mentioned? The regulation was one,
but what you see with most DePIN projects is that they are inherently all right. You got it back.
Yeah, I think we're always pushing to progressive decentralization, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I've been in crypto for a long time. I've fully drank the Kool-Aid. Like, I believe in decentralized networks. I believe IONET. Like, we're continuing to push more and more to decentralize. I don't think that I think you have to do it in steps. And so there's sort of decentralization governments, and then there's also sort of decentralization in the supply. And yes, right now we sort of live in a world where most AI does need to be done by A100s, H100, and those sort of the higher enterprise grade cards. Very few people have A100s sitting in their house, right? So, yes, obviously a lot of IONET supply does come from independent data centers who can provide these. Like most consumer chips, they don't really work that well for AI. They actually work great for things like rendering, but not as much AI. Now, that said, and maybe the fact that I'm not a machine learning engineer, I took a 400-hour coding boot camp in machine learning, so I know a little bit, but I'm definitely not an engineer by trade. But maybe that's almost a good thing because I'm not in the weeds. And I sort of step back, and it's if you look at the history of the world, consumer cards are going to get better, without question. I think in the next 3-5 years, we're going to see a world where a lot of these consumer cards can probably handle these AI workloads. And so, that changes our network significantly. It really does allow us to bring this sort of consumer story online. And then, even further along the line after that, I think that we could probably get to the point where mobile devices can be, everyone's heard this joke where, not a joke, but the fact that your iPhone has more computing power than what they used to launch the moon mission. So I can see a world in several years where our mobiles can execute complex machine learning operations.
You might be might be surprised, but there is already a project which is trying to do it.
Now we have a world where a company like IONET in 5 years could have literally 5 billion nodes, right? Because every mobile phone from from India to South Africa to Brazil to Canada is on our network. And I think I think we are building the architecture to do that. And I think once again, I think effectively it just provides a better, faster, cheaper solution. And so that's why I continue to remain so bullish on the technology, and I believe that smart engineers will continue to figure out these short-term problems.
Yeah, I think you made a really good point about the fact that consumer cards are getting better. It's quite crazy considering if you take two RTX 49, two of them have higher T-flops than an A100. The biggest issue of these consumer cards right now is just the memory. Memory is very bad. It's not great because they don't need 80 gigs of memory for your GPU. Yeah. It's not, you don't need it, right? You probably need 12. 12 is the bare minimum nowadays. 24 maybe for your gaming, for a few games here and there, high-end games. But that's about it. You don't need 80 gigs yet. Probably we will get there. I think there are a few catalysts which might get us there. Think about VR, think about AR. If it actually gets up and running and we get actual real VR, so not the VR which we have right now where you get dizzy and all that, but real VR, you would need a lot of compute actually. So I think we will get there in consumer cards. I will always think database cards are going to be better because they're going to make it better just for the price segmentation, right? But I think could be a world whereby consumer cards can be used, and I think that's going to be very interesting because that would bring you to a real significant USP because now all of a sudden you can be much cheaper than a data center, considering most of the consumer cards are actually more efficient. They are cheaper, significantly cheaper, by the way, in purchasing price. And
interesting story, and it's going to seem a bit unrelated, but when I was always looking to found a business, and the idea I had in the business was, one of the companies that inspired me most was Netflix. Oh. And the thing that I noticed about Netflix is obviously, I'm I'm going to show my age here, but I would get my DVDs in the mail from Netflix, and then one day Netflix was like, we're going to start putting movies online. And to me, I was like, what? Like, you can't do that. You can't stream a movie online. And then obviously it worked. And then all of a sudden I was like, wow, I guess they pivoted. But then I realized that they never pivoted, right? Like, I looked at the name, Netflix, right? This was always the goal. Like, it was so simple. It was right in front of us. Like, Reid Hoffman knew 10 years before the internet, like, really was able to do that the internet would be able to do. And so he just got really far ahead of that. And he's like, all right, I know the internet's going to be able to do this. I don't know for the next 10 years, I don't know how we're going to get there. So I'm just going to mail people DVDs. And like, I think that's kind of what's happening with IONET. Like, obviously we have a very viable business now with A100s and H100s. But like, if you really sit down and you sort of work backwards from first principles and say like, yes, I believe at some point in the future, consumer cards and even mobiles will be able to support the AI needs. And like, it's almost like not every, okay, so maybe they don't support full training. Maybe they support fine tuning. I'm sure they could definitely support inferencing, but I'm sort of like, I'm not starting from where we are today and thinking about, okay, what are the challenges? Like, I'm starting from what I believe is an inevitability that like all of these cards, I believe, will be supported at some time, and then sort of working back and saying like, all right, we know this is going to be the case. We need to get our foot in the market. What's the best way to do that? And the best way to do that now is to provide consumers what they need, which is enterprise grade for, for like inferencing operations, sometimes training operations. So I guess I just think of like, and that's like maybe one of the benefits of not being an engineer is, I'm not stuck with all these short-term challenges in front of me. I just kind of look at it from the opposite end.
That makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. And it's interesting to see how that actually grew, considering you could make the argument, I think we already have seen it a bit with cloud gaming. I think that's another really big vertical for decentralized compute, right? And now a lot of people would say, well, cloud gaming nowadays, cloud gaming is possible. It's true, it is possible, but it's not ideal. Specifically, if you want to do multiplayer games, you will always be at a significant disadvantage, considering we are talking about milliseconds. Even though it's only 60 milliseconds, that's a lot for an FPS. Whereby I think within the relatively the same time frame we were talking about, 10 years, most likely we wouldn't even own a computer anymore. Most likely it will just be someone else having like a computer. You will not even have to have a computer if you didn't want to have a computer, or maybe you don't want a big gaming rig, considering it's expensive, and you're just a casual gamer. You just want to game so now and then, and here you go. You go to IONET or another DePIN platform which is able to provide you that, or maybe Steam will even be able to do it by then. But that's quite interesting to think about. And if we can do it even by consumer cards, it would be obviously much more decentralized. And you have a unique USP, considering data centers are not allowed to take these consumer cards. So I saw a few in the chat were like, wait, why are these data centers not using consumer cards if they're so much better? They are not allowed. They are not allowed to by the NVIDIA TOS. If you have the decentralized one, you're not a data center.
You talk about this, like we talk about this idea, like, is performance better or worse? Like it's an absolute. But I think you bring up a great point, when you talk about like, cloud gaming, and like, yes, it may always be worse, but it may not matter, right? Because, what's the difference between like, if the difference in latency is like, hundreds of a millisecond, like doesn't matter. Humans can't comprehend that. And like I said, I just think, and this is sort of the benefit of experience. Like, I've seen so many things. I mean, when I was in college, I literally remember like having to wait for a picture to load. And then it was like, oh, wow, okay, we can now stream like movies, but like live TV, no way. Like, no way you could stream live TV. And then like all of a sudden we have like Fubo. And like, I don't know if streaming live TV is technically faster or slower than getting, cable through your cable box. Maybe it is slower, but the difference is so small that my human brain can't comprehend it. Sort of same thing with gaming. And like I said, it may be like, all right, well, it's, 1/1,000,000% worse to train a model on, in 10 years, train a model on mobile phones, but it's 70% cheaper. I mean, I think everyone's going to make that trade-off.
Yeah, I agree. I think to be fair, I think probably for a niche market, it will matter. I think for the competitive players, it most likely will matter, but that doesn't necessarily matter because I don't think that's the real audience. The real audience are the casual gamers. And if you think about, for example, if you ever go to Asia and you just go to a random metro, like in China or in Japan, everyone is playing on their mobile. Like everyone, every age, there is no difference. Everyone is doing it, from kids which are 10 years old to people which are 65. Everyone is playing games on mobile. So I think there is a real business opportunity there. I'm also a bit wondering about, obviously we have been talking about evolve over time, but what do you think about the current state? What do you think about the current DePIN market? Because we already are big going into the future, but I want to pick your brain a bit about the current state.
I don't spend a lot of time thinking about the DePIN market as a whole. Like, obviously, when I was thinking about founding IONET, I researched DePIN quite a bit. Now, I will say one of the reasons I did found IONET, joined with a mod, was that I believe that one of our key differences from, like, I've always believed in the sort of economics of DePIN. Right? To me, it just makes sense. And actually, I personally think it's the best, most logical, like, technology in crypto, right? Like, I love crypto, but DePIN just makes a ton of sense to me. And, like, I love everyone in DePIN. I love Render, I love Filecoin, I love Helium, HiveMapper. Like, I think these are all great ideas. Now, that said, obviously I'm biased towards IONET, but, like, I think one of the challenges I've historically faced looking at DePIN projects is I think historically they weren't always solving hair on fire problem, right? Like Filecoin, fantastic project. But like there's not there's not always a huge need for storage. Render, like one of my favorite projects. I've been a fan of Render for a long time. We're very close partners. They're a great partner. I think Render in several years, people will realize how big it is, especially because the metaverse is going to require like absolutely so much rendering. But right now, I don't think rendering is a huge business case, right? It's still sort of like niche to certain areas. Helium, same thing, great idea, but like wireless access is not a problem. The unique thing about IONET is that access to compute is the most valuable asset in the world, and access to compute is a serious problem. And so what you have is you have arguably the biggest problem in the world combined with arguably the best solution in the world, and granted I'm biased, but like I think that's a magical combination that very, very few people realize. And like, there's this sort of idea about crossing the chasm, and I don't know how much people are familiar with this, but in general, the chasm is this idea that like, if you look at the adoption curve, there's always a group of people called early innovators. It's like 3 to 4% of the population that like they just try shit because it's cool and it's new. And then you have the next layer, which are called early adopters. These are people that they don't try things because of novelty, but they can realize when a technology is good very early. This represents about 20% of the population. After that, you have what's called the early majority and the late majority, right? So these are the people that try things when they know they work. Everyone on this Discord is either an innovator or an early adopter, right? Sort of like by virtue of being in the crypto space, you're one of those two, because crypto has actually not crossed the chasm, right? Like crypto, while it has a lot of promise, it's, like people aren't using it as money. People aren't really using DeFi as alternative to banks. And if you actually look at the global ownership of crypto, it's really like it's like estimates range from 15 to 20%, which basically means that like most people in crypto are intrigued because they think the technology is cool. They're not actually like it's not providing enough value for the majority to use it. I think one of the unique things about IONET is I do believe that once again we have this true hair on fire problem, which is access to compute, and we have a real solution, which is decentralized network. If we can get this right, a lot of people are going to be like, wait a minute, this is a solution that's just as reliable as what I can get from AWS and significantly cheaper. I actually think this crosses the chasm, and like we can like get penetration to the mass market. And I would argue if we do that, we could arguably one of the first crypto projects that actually crosses the chasm. And like this is not just about like IONET or DePIN. Like I don't just want to be a leader of DePIN. I want to sort of be the vanguard of crypto. And my dream is for a world to say like, whoa, crypto is real, right? Like people are actually using it like to solve this major problem. And so a bit of a long-winded answer, but that's kind of how I think of DePINs as a whole. And like I said, it doesn't have to be IONET, but like I think DePINs represent one of the best chances to cross the chasm.
Yeah, I think I do agree. I think definitely DePIN in general have a really good bet. I think there's a couple of other industries which could have like a real chance as well, but I think if I had to make a top three, DePIN would be in there, 100%. The one thing I'm very much wondering about is I think currently one of the biggest issues for crypto is the overall user experience, right? So what's your take on that?
I agree. I think we have, if you're talking pure UX, and we got Maher on here, who's our Chief Experience Officer, I think IONET has a pretty damn good UX. It's interesting. When I was on these VC calls, we'd have these like long calls, and they'd ask me all these questions, and they just wouldn't get it. And then I'd finally like screen share and on board, and they'd be like, whoa, dude, you should have just done that in the first 3 minutes. Like, this is like, it's very intuitive, right? Like, you can go on IONET and you can spin up a cluster in a matter of seconds, like, even if you're not technical. Now, obviously, IONET, we sort of short circuit a lot of the user experience problems. You don't have to connect the wallet. You can pay in fiat. We make it a lot easier. But I agree, like, if you want to, like, geek out about crypto as a whole, I think that user experience is a huge problem. And I think, like, that's why I'm a big fan of, once again, we're getting off topic, but, like, account abstraction. This idea that, the idea that if I send my money to the wrong person, I can't get it back, we're never going to achieve mass adoption. So, if I look at crypto as a whole, sort of the three big problems that are faced are speed, user experience, and privacy. I think there's a lot of work being done on those areas. Like with speed, obviously, the super fast networks like Solana, Aptos, who we're partnered with. You have this new crop of L2s. For user experience, I think you have account abstraction. I think that's fascinating. The ability to have like smart wallets, where it's like, yeah, okay, you can like, because one of the things, like, even though we all hate banks, one of the cool things about the bank is like, if I send money to the wrong person, I can get it back, right? We kind of need that in crypto. And, even like, I've been in this industry for 7 years, and I still sweat when I send large amounts of money. I'm sure a lot of people here are the same. And then finally, privacy. I think, like, obviously, I think IONET is like, we're working on that a lot, but I think crypto in general, like the idea that all transactions are on chain, I think zero knowledge will do a lot for that, but I think that is overall. But yes, I agree with you that user experience in crypto as a whole is generally a problem, and I think that's why with IONET we've tried to streamline it as much as possible.
Awesome. Well, we will have talking about account abstraction. We have a considerable research coming up about it, so more is happy to send it over to everyone here soon.
I'd love to read it.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for everything. I really appreciated the talk, guys. Thank you so much. It was really interesting.
Thank you so much too, Dedric. Thank you so much for your time. Tory, go for it.
Oh, no, I'm just going to say thank you, everyone, and thank you, Dedric. It was always a great conversation.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the talk with you.
Thank you, guys. It was really insightful. For those of you that have stayed here until the end, you guys remember that there's a little quiz about the AMA that is going to go live literally in 1 minute, so don't forget to go and do that. And also, we have one last thing before we wrap this up. This has been going for a long time, but there will be an opportunity for one lucky winner within the chat. So ask one question that you would really want Dedric to answer from House of Chimera. And the chosen winner by Mr. Dedric will be the one that receives the prize. So go for it. Ask away your questions in the chat. We have 1-2 minutes, so let's go for it.
Even though AI already has been around for around 30 to 35 years by now, the consumer products like ChatGPT are completely new. So that means more and more people like you in the chat will actually get access to really interesting stuff. So I think one is AI. The second one is cloud gaming. Why cloud gaming? We already talked about it earlier a bit, but specifically in Southeast Asia, the number of players playing games daily is incredibly high. And if you look how they game, it's all mobile games. The main reason for that is a gamer rig is just expensive. There's a couple of other things. Think about, for example, connection, that sort of stuff. But these sort of things can most of the times relatively easy be solved if there's enough demand for it. Whereby just increasing the middle class, the income, that's much harder. Excuse me. It's not. You cannot just say, all right, we make computers now super cheap, or the people in these countries have to earn much more, right? And if you talk about, well, what's the driving use case for crypto? I think everything what will implement good user experience. Like I said, we have a really big research about it. And actually, Tory made a really good point here where he said, well, if you look at the banks, if you do a cross-border transaction today, it's very easy. You can do it in a few taps. And there's a lot of things which will actually happen abstracted away from you. You have no idea actually how it all works because you don't have to. In Web3, you have to understand how to bridge. You have to understand where to go. You have to make sure you don't click a wrong website, otherwise all your funds are gone. These sort of things it doesn't make sense. Like, we have to make our the technology much more accessible. And there's two ways currently which we're working, well, not we, but the industry is working on it. It's account abstraction, and then you have the extra layer, which is chain abstraction. Well, I'm not going too deep on that, but that's the two things which we are very excited for, and I think that will definitely change how we actually behave with crypto and within the Web3 industry.
Amazing answer. Thank you so much for taking the time to answer our winning community question. And thank you again for coming here to the Discord. Thank you to Tory for engaging in this wonderful discussion, and to the rest of the team for answering the questions. Thank you all, guys. It was a lovely AMA, and we hope to see you in more and more AMAs. So stay tuned.
Bye-bye, guys.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Thank you. Have a good one.